The rushing waters of the Snake River churned beneath Olivia Foster's feet as she stared down from the edge of Widow's Cliff, her soaked skirts heavy with river water and desperation. It was October 1876, and the Wyoming Territory held nothing for her now but ghosts and debts. The gold rush had faded years ago, leaving her father's claim worthless and his gambling debts insurmountable. After his passing 3 days prior, the collectors had taken everything: the cabin, the mining equipment, even her mother's silver locket. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, the river had seemed like the only escape. Her first attempt had failed when the current swept her ashore, but this time she would make sure. Olivia closed her eyes, the autumn wind whipping her auburn hair as she prepared to step forward into oblivion. The sound of hoofbeats barely registered until a deep voice cut through her thoughts. "Madam, I'd advise against taking another step." She turned, startled, to find a man on horseback watching her with steady green eyes. His face was weather-beaten beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and he sat tall in the saddle of his chestnut stallion. "This is not your concern," she said, her voice barely audible above the rushing water. "Please, just ride on." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, leading his horse closer, but maintaining enough distance not to spook her. "I'm afraid I can't do that. Not when I just pulled you from these same waters not an hour ago." Olivia's breath caught. She hadn't seen who had dragged her from the river downstream. She had awakened alone on the riverbank, gasping and coughing, then stumbled upriver to try again. "You're not going under again," he said firmly, removing his hat to reveal dark blonde hair. "Whatever demons you're running from, drowning won't silence them." "You don't understand," Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "There's nothing left." "There's always something left, madam. Name's Gideon Zane." He extended his hand slowly, as if approaching a skittish colt. "And if you'll step away from that ledge, I'll make you some coffee and listen to whatever brought you here." For reasons she couldn't explain, perhaps simply the kindness in a world that had shown her none lately, Olivia found herself taking a step back from the edge. Her legs trembled, whether from cold or relief she couldn't tell. "Olivia," she managed. "Olivia Foster." Gideon nodded, moving forward cautiously to wrap a wool blanket around her shoulders. "Miss Foster, I've got a camp set up just beyond those trees. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry." She followed him mechanically, half expecting to wake from this strange encounter. His horse snorted softly as they approached, and Gideon murmured soothingly to the animal. The camp was indeed simple: a small fire, a bedroll, and saddlebags containing provisions. Gideon added wood to the flames, then set a battered coffee pot among the coals. Neither spoke as the water began to boil, the silence broken only by the crackle of the fire and distant call of night birds. "What brings you to Snake River?" Gideon finally asked, pouring steaming coffee into a tin cup and offering it to her. Olivia's hands shook as she accepted the drink. "My father's funeral," she said bluntly, "and the end of everything he built." Gideon nodded without pressing. "I'm sorry for your loss. Are you?" She asked bitterly. "You didn't know him. A dreamer who chased gold until the dream killed him and left me with nothing." "I know something about dreams turning sour," he replied, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Was headed to Sweetwater myself. Got work as a horse trainer at the R Ranch. Sweetwater's 30 miles north," Olivia said. Gideon smiled slightly. "Was taking the scenic route. Good thing I did." The coffee warmed her body, but her spirit remained cold. "Why did you save me? You don't know me." "Don't need to know someone to recognize value in them," he answered simply. "World's full of folks who'd walk on by. I'm just not one of them." Olivia stared into her coffee, watching the reflection of flames dance on its surface. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted. "The bank took everything this morning." Gideon considered this, his expression thoughtful. "R is always looking for help. Owner's wife is getting on in years, might need a housekeeper or cook." "I don't need charity," Olivia said sharply. "Good, because I'm not offering any. Just suggesting honest work for someone who needs it." He studied her face in the firelight. Unless you had other plans besides the river, the question hung between them, heavy with implication. Olivia looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I can ride with you to Sweetwater tomorrow, Gideon offered. No expectations beyond that. She should refuse, Olivia knew. She was a stranger to this man and he to her. Yet the alternative was unthinkable now that she'd stepped back from the edge both literally and figuratively. All right, she said finally. To Sweetwater. Gideon nodded, satisfied. Get some rest, Miss Foster. I'll keep watch. Morning brought clarity Olivia hadn't expected. She woke wrapped in Gideon's blanket, finding him already tending the fire and frying bacon in a small pan. The scent made her stomach growl loudly, reminding her she hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. Good morning, Gideon said, glancing up with a small smile. Thought you might be hungry. Embarrassed, Olivia sat up, attempting to smooth her tangled hair. Thank you for everything. He shrugged, sliding a portion of bacon onto a tin plate. Journey to Sweetwater will take most of today. Ought to start with a decent meal. As they ate, Olivia studied her unlikely rescuer. In daylight, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30. His hands were calloused but gentle in their movements, and his eyes missed nothing, constantly scanning their surroundings. Have you worked with horses long? She asked, breaking the silence. Since I was tall enough to reach a stirrup, he replied. My father ran a breeding operation in Kentucky before the war, taught me everything I know. Why come west then? Gideon's expression darkened momentarily. Some memories are better left behind. The frontier offers fresh starts. Olivia understood that sentiment all too well. My father came for gold in '68. Mother died of fever the first winter. He kept saying the next claim would be the one. She shook her head. 8 years of next claims, and all we had to show for it was debt. Gold fever's a disease worse than any other, Gideon observed. Seen it claim more lives than cholera. They broke camp efficiently, Gideon insisting Olivia ride his horse, Samson, while he walked alongside. The day was crisp and clear, the Wyoming landscape stretching endlessly around them. Despite her circumstances, Olivia found herself noticing the beauty of the golden aspens against the deep green pines, the way sunlight painted the distant mountains. You're good with him, Gideon remarked, watching as she confidently handled Samson when they paused to rest at midday. Father always had horses for the claims, she explained. Usually the cheapest he could find, but I learned to manage them. It shows, Samson doesn't take to just anyone. As they continued their journey, Olivia gradually shared more of her story: her mother's death, her father's increasingly desperate search for gold, the mounting debts, and finally his heart giving out 3 days earlier, leaving her alone to face the creditors. I thought I could at least keep the cabin, she admitted. But they took everything by sundown yesterday. I had nowhere to go, no family to turn to. And the river seemed like an answer, Gideon finished quietly. Olivia nodded, ashamed now in the light of day. It was cowardice. No, Gideon said firmly. It was despair. There's a difference. Despair can be overcome. They reached Sweetwater just as dusk was falling. The small town bustled with activity. A cattle drive had recently ended, and cowboys with money in their pockets filled the saloons. Olivia felt painfully aware of her bedraggled appearance as they made their way to the livery stable. I know the Triple R foreman, Gideon explained as they dismounted. He's usually here in town on Tuesday evenings. We'll find him and inquire about positions. The livery owner, a barrel-chested man named Peterson, greeted Gideon warmly. Zane, thought you'd be here days ago. Rollins been asking after you. Had some delays, Gideon replied, glancing at Olivia. Peterson, this is Miss Olivia Foster. She's looking for work as well. Is Rollins at the Silver Dollar? Peterson nodded, eyeing Olivia curiously. Been there since sundown. Who's the lady to you, Zane? A friend who needs honest work, Gideon answered firmly, his tone discouraging further questions. The Silver Dollar saloon was crowded and smoky, piano music barely audible above the din of voices. Olivia hesitated at the entrance, uncomfortably aware of the curious glances directed their way. Respectable women didn't enter saloons, but Gideon placed a reassuring hand at her elbow. "Stay close," he murmured. "Rollins is by the back wall." They navigated through the crowd to a table where a gray-haired man sat nursing a whiskey. He looked up, recognition lighting his weathered face. "About time you showed, Zane," he exclaimed, rising to shake Gideon's hand. "Was beginning to think you'd found better prospects. Just encountered some unexpected circumstances," Gideon replied, turning to introduce Olivia. "This is Miss Foster. She's seeking employment as well. Thought Mrs. Rollins might need household help." The foreman studied Olivia with shrewd eyes. "Martha's been complaining about managing the main house alone. What can you do, Miss Foster?" "I can cook, clean, sew, and manage accounts," Olivia answered steadily, lifting her chin. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Rollins." The man nodded approvingly. "Forthright, Martha will like that." He turned back to Gideon. "Mr. Richardson wants you starting tomorrow with those new Morgans. Both of you can ride out with me at first light." Relief flooded through Olivia, making her knees weak. Employment meant survival. It meant purpose beyond the rushing waters that had nearly claimed her. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "Don't thank me yet," Rollins warned. "Martha runs a tight ship. You'll earn your keep." He stood, draining his whiskey. "There's a boarding house across the street. Tell Mrs. Wilson I sent you. She'll have rooms for the night." After securing lodging, Olivia found herself alone in a small but clean room, her first real privacy since the previous morning. She sank onto the narrow bed, overwhelmed by the rapid turn her circumstances had taken. 24 hours ago, she had been prepared to end her life. Now she had employment, a roof, and a chance, all because a stranger had refused to let her drown. A soft knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Gideon, hat in hand. "Mrs. Wilson says supper's ready downstairs," he said. "Thought you might be hungry." "Thank you," Olivia replied, suddenly shy in this new context. "Mr. Zane, Gideon, I don't know how to repay your kindness." His eyes held her steadily. "Live, Miss Foster, that's repayment enough." The Triple R Ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of prime Wyoming Territory. Its main house, a two-story structure of solid timber that spoke of prosperity and permanence. As they approached after the long morning ride from town, Olivia couldn't help comparing it to her father's ramshackle cabin. "Impressive," she murmured. "Richardson started with nothing 20 years ago," Rollins explained. "Now runs 2,000 head of cattle and breeds the finest horses in the territory." Martha Rollins proved to be a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She inspected Olivia thoroughly before declaring her passable, and immediately put her to work helping prepare lunch for the returning ranch hands. The kitchen was hot and busy, but Olivia found comfort in the familiar tasks. By late afternoon, when she finally had a moment to catch her breath, she realized she hadn't thought of the river once. "You work well," Martha observed, watching as Olivia efficiently kneaded bread dough. "Not afraid to get your hands dirty like some girls I've seen." "Thank you, madam," Olivia replied. "My mother taught me young." Martha nodded approvingly. "Rollins says Zane found you on the trail. Known him long?" The question was casual, but Olivia sensed the woman's protective interest in the answer. "We met yesterday," she admitted. "He helped me when I was in trouble." Martha murmured, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds like him. Man's got a habit of collecting strays, horses, dogs, people in need. Heart's too big for his own good sometimes." Olivia didn't know how to respond to that assessment, so she focused on her bread making. Later, as she carried linens to the laundry shed, she caught sight of Gideon in the corral, working with a spirited young Morgan. Even from a distance, she could see the quiet confidence in his movements, the way the horse responded to his gentle but firm handling. The days fell into a rhythm. Olivia rose before dawn to help prepare breakfast, spent mornings cleaning the main house, afternoons cooking and helping Martha with various chores, and evenings mending or doing accounts. The work was exhausting but satisfying. She slept in a small room off the kitchen, grateful for the privacy and security it offered. She saw Gideon mainly at mealtimes, when he would nod politely in her direction but rarely engage in conversation. Sometimes she would glimpse him working with the horses, his patience evident even with the most difficult animals. The other ranch hands clearly respected his skill, deferring to his judgment on training matters. A week after their arrival, Olivia was hanging laundry when one of the younger ranch hands, a boy named Tommy, came running. "Miss Foster, Mrs. Rollins needs you at the bunkhouse. Zane's been hurt." Her heart lurching, Olivia followed the boy across the yard to the long, low building where the ranch hands slept. Inside, she found Gideon sitting on a bunk, his face pale beneath his tan as Martha examined a deep gash on his forearm. "What happened?" Olivia asked, hurrying forward. "New stallion took exception to being saddled," Gideon answered through gritted teeth. "Caught my arm on a nail when he threw me into the fence." Martha looked up as Olivia approached. "Good, you're here. Need your younger eyes for the stitching. Mine aren't what they used to be." Olivia swallowed hard but nodded, rolling up her sleeves. She had assisted with injuries before frontier life ensured everyone had basic medical knowledge. "Tommy, fetch the whiskey," Martha ordered. "And you, Zane, stop being stoic. This'll hurt like blazes." Gideon managed a tight smile. "Not my first set of stitches, Mrs. Rollins." While Martha prepared needle and thread, Olivia carefully cleaned the wound. It was deep but clean, slicing through the muscle of his forearm. "You're lucky it missed the tendon," she murmured, trying to be gentle despite his obvious pain. "Doesn't feel particularly lucky at the moment," Gideon replied, then winced as she applied disinfectant. Martha handed Olivia the threaded needle. "Steady hands now, girl. Make 'em neat and close." Olivia took a deep breath, focusing on the task rather than the man whose arm was beneath her fingers. She worked methodically, aware of Gideon's controlled breathing as she drew the needle through his flesh. When she finished, Martha inspected her work with a critical eye. "Good, clean stitches." "You've done this before. Mining camps see plenty of injuries," Olivia explained, wrapping bandages around Gideon's arm. "Father cut his leg badly once. I had to stitch it." Gideon watched her face as she worked. "You have steady hands," he observed quietly. Their eyes met briefly and Olivia felt an unexpected warmth in her cheeks. She looked away first, securing the bandage. "You should rest that arm for a few days," he chuckled. "Mrs. Rollins, you hear that? Doctor's orders," Martha snorted. "She's right, though. Can't have you reopening those stitches and bleeding all over the horses. You're on light duty until I say otherwise." After Martha left, Olivia began cleaning up the medical supplies, acutely aware of Gideon's continued presence. "Thank you," he said finally, "for the stitching. And for not mentioning how much I flinched." She smiled despite herself. "Your secret is safe with me." Hesitating, she added, "I've been meaning to thank you properly, for the river, for bringing me here. I haven't had the chance." "No thanks needed," Gideon replied, his green eyes serious. "Just glad to see you finding your footing." "I am," Olivia admitted. "It's strange how quickly life can change. A week ago I thought I had nothing left. Now," she gestured around them, "now I have work, a roof, purpose." "Purpose matters," Gideon agreed. "Keeps a person moving forward." Impulsively, Olivia asked, "What's your purpose, Gideon? Beyond horses, I mean." The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it before answering, "Been asking myself that lately. For a long time it was just about moving, staying ahead of the past. Now." He shrugged. "Maybe it's time to build something instead of running." The conversation felt suddenly intimate, and Olivia busied herself with gathering the remaining supplies. "I should get back to the laundry." Gideon nodded, standing carefully. "I appreciate the doctoring, Miss Foster." "Olivia," she corrected. "After pulling someone from a river and letting them stitch your arm, I think first names are permitted." His smile transformed his face, softening the weathered lines. "Olivia, then." That evening, as she helped serve dinner to the ranch hands, Olivia found herself watching Gideon more closely. He sat somewhat apart from the others, his injured arm held carefully as he ate left-handed. There was something solitary about him, even surrounded by people. It reminded her of herself. The autumn weeks passed quickly. October gave way to November, bringing colder temperatures and occasional snow flurries. Olivia settled into life at the Triple R, earning Martha's grudging approval and Mr. Richardson's respect for her meticulous bookkeeping skills. She received a small salary, which she carefully saved, determined never again to be as desperate as she had been that day at the river. Gideon's arm healed well, and he returned to full duties with the horses. He and Olivia developed a cautious friendship, exchanging pleasantries at meals and occasionally conversing when their paths crossed around the ranch. She learned he had fought for the Union during the Civil War, had traveled extensively afterward, and possessed a surprising knowledge of literature that emerged when he discovered her reading Shakespeare one evening. "Hamlet?" he asked, finding her by the kitchen fire with the weathered volume. Olivia looked up, startled. "It was my mother's, one of the few things I managed to keep." "To be or not to be," Gideon quoted softly, taking a seat across from her. "Appropriate, considering how we met." The reference to her suicide attempt might have stung, but his tone held no judgment. "I've thought about that day often," she admitted. "How different things would be if you hadn't come along." "Or if you hadn't changed your mind," Gideon countered. "I may have pulled you from the water once, but you chose to step back from that cliff." His insight surprised her. "I suppose that's true. Sometimes I wonder what gave me the courage." "Not courage," Gideon said thoughtfully. "Hope, maybe. Even the smallest spark is enough when everything else is dark." Their conversation was interrupted by Martha calling Olivia to help with a late delivery of supplies, but his words lingered in her mind. Hope. She hadn't recognized it at the time, but perhaps that was indeed what had made her step back the faintest possibility that life could be different than the despair she had known. As Thanksgiving approached, the ranch bustled with preparations for the holiday feast. The Richardsons traditionally invited neighboring ranchers and townspeople from Sweetwater, making it a community celebration. Olivia found herself working alongside Martha from dawn until dusk, baking pies, preparing side dishes, and planning the elaborate meal. 2 days before the holiday, a winter storm blew in, dropping temperatures dramatically and covering the ranch in several inches of snow. Olivia woke before dawn to find the kitchen already cold despite the banked fire. As she stoked the flames and began breakfast preparations, the back door opened, admitting a blast of frigid air and a snow-covered Gideon. "Morning," he greeted, stamping snow from his boots. "Thought I smelled coffee." "Just starting," Olivia replied, noting his reddened face and hands. "You look frozen." "Checking the horses in the north pasture," he explained, moving gratefully toward the fire. Temperature dropped fast overnight. Richardson's worried about the stream freezing. Olivia poured coffee as soon as it was ready, pressing the hot cup into his hands. "Here." "Your fingers are like ice." Their hands touched briefly in the exchange, and Gideon's eyes met hers with unexpected warmth. "Thank you, Olivia." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, or simply an acknowledgement of the connection that had been gradually building. Olivia felt her cheeks flush, and she turned quickly to the stove, busying herself with breakfast preparations. The storm continued throughout the day, forcing everyone to remain close to the main buildings. By evening, it was clear the planned Thanksgiving gathering would need to be postponed. Mr. Richardson announced they would have a smaller celebration with just the ranch residents. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and brilliantly cold, the landscape transformed into a glistening white expanse. Despite the smaller guest list, Martha insisted on maintaining traditions, and Olivia spent the morning helping prepare the feast. The mood in the kitchen was festive, with even Martha humming as she basted the turkey. When they gathered around the long table in the main dining room, Olivia found herself seated beside Gideon. Mr. Richardson, at the head of the table, asked everyone to share something they were thankful for before the meal. When Olivia's turn came, she spoke without hesitation. "I'm thankful for second chances," she said simply, aware of Gideon's gaze, "and for those who help us find them." Gideon's response when his turn came was equally direct. "I'm thankful for purpose, and for being in the right place at the right time." The meal was joyous, with conversation and laughter flowing freely. Afterward, while the men retired to smoke and the Richardsons entertained in the parlor, Olivia slipped outside to enjoy a moment of solitude. The night was cold but beautiful, stars brilliant in the clear sky above the snow-covered ranch. She hadn't been outside long when she heard footsteps crunching in the snow behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Gideon. "Beautiful night," he remarked, coming to stand beside her. "It is," Olivia agreed. "Sometimes I forget to look up and notice." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Finally, Gideon spoke. "Been thinking about something," he said, his voice contemplative. "When I found you at the river that day, I told myself I was just doing what any decent person would. But the truth is, something changed for me too." Olivia turned to look at him, his features illuminated by moonlight reflecting off the snow. "What do you mean?" "I told you I've been moving for years, staying ahead of the past. But watching you build something new from nothing, it made me wonder if I could do the same." He met her gaze. "You're not the only one who got a second chance that day, Olivia." The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. "I've never properly thanked you," she said softly, "for saving my life." "You have," Gideon countered, "every day since by living it fully." Impulsively, Olivia reached for his hand, finding it warm despite the cold night. "I'm glad you were there, Gideon. I'm glad it was you." His fingers curled around hers, strong and gentle. "So am I." The moment held promise of what, exactly, Olivia wasn't certain, but for the first time since her father's death, perhaps longer, she felt something like contentment settle in her heart. December brought Christmas preparations and a rhythm of winter work at the ranch. Cattle needed extra feed, horses required additional care in the cold, and the main house demanded constant attention to keep pipes from freezing and fires burning. Olivia found herself busier than ever, yet strangely content with the demanding schedule. Her friendship with Gideon deepened gradually. They began taking evening walks when weather permitted, sharing stories of their pasts. Olivia learned about his Kentucky childhood, his difficult war experiences, and the tragedy that had sent him westward, the death of his young wife and infant son from fever 5 years earlier. "I couldn't stay after that," he explained one evening as they walked the perimeter of the ranch yard. "Every corner of our farm held memories, so I sold it, bought Samson, and just started riding." "I understand that need to escape," Olivia replied. "After Mother died, Father moved us from claim to claim. I think he was running from grief as much as chasing gold." "Grief's a hard companion," Gideon agreed. "But it changes over time, becomes something you can carry without being crushed by it." In turn, Olivia shared more about her childhood, her mother's gentle guidance, and her complicated relationship with her father, a man she had both loved and resented for his dreams that never materialized. "He meant well," she explained. "But intentions don't fill empty stomachs or mend leaking roofs. By the end, I was so angry with him for leaving me with nothing but debt. It's hard to reconcile that with grieving him." "You can love someone and still see their failings clearly," Gideon observed. "Might even be the truer form of love." These conversations, exchanged in the quiet of winter evenings, formed a bond between them that was both unexpected and increasingly precious to Olivia. She found herself looking forward to their encounters, missing Gideon when ranch duties kept him away for days at outlying pastures. Martha noticed, of course. The older woman had sharp eyes and missed little that happened under her roof. "That Zane's a good man," she remarked casually one afternoon as she and Olivia preserved the last of the fall apples. "Steady, not like some who drift through these parts." Olivia concentrated on slicing apples, avoiding Martha's knowing gaze. "He's been kind to me." Martha hummed noncommittally. Known him 3 years now, never seen him walk out in the snow just to talk with anyone before. The observation made Olivia's cheeks warm, but she offered no reply. Her feelings for Gideon were still too new, too tender to discuss openly even with herself. As Christmas approached, the ranch hands organized an impromptu dance in the barn. They cleared the central space, hung lanterns from the rafters, and convinced one of the cowhands who played fiddle to provide music. Martha contributed punch, Mr. Richardson donated a bottle of good whiskey, and everyone dressed in their Sunday best for the occasion. Olivia wore her one good dress, dark green wool with a lace collar, rescued from her father's cabin before the bank took everything. She had carefully mended and cleaned it, adding a bit of ribbon Martha had given her. Her hair, usually pulled back severely for work, she arranged in a simple but flattering style. When she entered the barn, the transformation was remarkable. Lanterns cast a warm glow over the space, hay bales arranged as seating around the edges, and evergreen branches decorated with red berries added a festive touch. The ranch hands, usually dusty and rumpled, had made valiant efforts with their appearance, hair slicked down and boots polished. Olivia spotted Gideon immediately. He stood apart from the others, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his clean shirt and vest. When he caught sight of her, his expression changed to one of appreciation, and he moved to meet her. "You look beautiful," he said simply, the directness of the compliment making her flush with pleasure. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." The fiddle struck up a lively tune, and several couples took to the floor. Gideon watched them for a moment before turning back to Olivia. "Would you care to dance, Miss Foster?" he asked formally, though his eyes held a glint of humor. "I would indeed, Mr. Zane," she replied with equal formality, placing her hand in his outstretched palm. Gideon proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, leading her confidently through the steps. Olivia had learned the basics from her mother long ago, but had few opportunities to practice in mining camps. Still, she followed his lead easily, laughing when she occasionally missed a step. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked during a brief pause between songs. "My mother insisted," Gideon replied with a smile. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a wounded buffalo." The image made Olivia laugh, and Gideon's smile widened at the sound. "You should laugh more often," he said softly. "It suits you." Before she could respond, the fiddle began again, this time a slower waltz. Without asking, Gideon drew her closer, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. They moved together with unexpected harmony, the rest of the gathering seeming to fade around them. "I never expected this," Olivia admitted as they danced, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "The dance, any of it, being here, being—" She hesitated, unsure how to articulate the contentment she felt, being happy again. Gideon's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I know the feeling." When the music ended, neither moved immediately to separate. For a suspended moment, they stood close enough that Olivia could feel the warmth of his breath, see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Then someone called Gideon's name, breaking the spell. The evening continued with more dancing, storytelling, and eventually carol singing as Christmas was only days away. Throughout it all, Olivia remained aware of Gideon's presence, the way his eyes found hers across the room, the subtle touches as he handed her a cup of punch or guided her back to the dance floor. As the celebration wound down, snow began to fall outside, large flakes drifting past the barn doors. Gideon offered to walk Olivia back to the main house, draping his coat around her shoulders against the cold. They paused halfway across the yard, the snow falling silently around them, transforming the familiar landscape into something magical. "Thank you for the dances," Olivia said, looking up at him. "I can't remember the last time I enjoyed an evening so much." Gideon reached up to brush a snowflake from her cheek, his touch lingering. "Nor can I." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then, with gentle deliberation, Gideon bent his head and kissed her. His lips were warm against hers, the contact brief but unmistakably tender. When he pulled away, his expression was a question. In answer, Olivia rose on tiptoes and returned the kiss, her heart racing as his arms came around her. They stood together in the falling snow, the kiss deepening into something that spoke of longing and newfound hope. When they finally parted, Olivia felt breathless, her emotions a tumult of surprise and joy. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Gideon admitted, his voice rough. Olivia smiled up at him, snow catching in her lashes. "I'm glad you finally did." Christmas at the Triple R was a joyous affair, with a feast rivaling Thanksgiving and an exchange of simple gifts. Olivia had used her small savings to purchase material in Sweetwater, from which she sewed shirts for the Richardsons and Martha. For Gideon, she made a leather-bound journal, having noticed him sometimes writing in the evenings. His gift to her left her speechless, a delicate silver locket on a fine chain, reminiscent of the one her mother had owned, lost to her father's debts. "How did you know?" she asked, touching it reverently. "You mentioned it once when you told me about your father's debts," Gideon explained. "Thought you might like to have something similar." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved her deeply. That night, after the celebrations had ended and the ranch was quiet, they sat together by the kitchen fire, speaking of the future for the first time. "Richardson's offered me a permanent position," Gideon said. "Head trainer with the opportunity to breed my own line of horses eventually." "That's wonderful," Olivia replied sincerely. "Will you accept?" He studied her face in the firelight, thinking about it. "Would mean settling here, putting down roots." He hesitated. "What about you? Will you stay on at the ranch?" The question carried weight beyond the simple words. Olivia considered her answer carefully. "I've grown fond of this place," she said. "Martha's teaching me to manage the household accounts, and Mr. Richardson mentioned making my position permanent as well." "So we'd both be staying," Gideon observed, taking her hand. "Interesting coincidence." Olivia smiled, interlacing her fingers with his. "Is it coincidence? Or something else entirely?" Instead of answering directly, Gideon leaned forward to kiss her, his free hand cradling her face with exquisite gentleness. In that moment, Olivia felt the last shadows of the desperate woman at the river's edge dissolve completely, replaced by a woman who dared to imagine a future filled with purpose and love. Winter in Wyoming was harsh but beautiful. January brought severe storms that isolated the ranch for days at a time, forcing everyone to stay close to the main buildings. February saw temperatures plummet to dangerous lows, making even routine chores challenging. Through it all, the Triple R community pulled together, finding warmth in shared meals and evening gatherings around the fire. Olivia and Gideon's relationship deepened during these winter months. They spent evenings reading aloud from her Shakespeare collection or his dog-eared copy of The Last of the Mohicans. They took walks when weather permitted, bundled against the cold, discovering shared interests and complementary differences. Their courtship was conducted with a certain discretion, respectful of ranch proprieties, but it was no secret. Martha gave her tacit approval by conveniently finding tasks that allowed them time together, while Mr. Richardson merely commented that stability suits Zane. By March, when the first hints of spring appeared in longer days and occasional thaws, Gideon approached Mr. Richardson about building a small house on the ranch property. "Been thinking about the future," he explained to Olivia one evening as they walked along the partially thawed stream. "If I'm staying on as head trainer, I'll need my own place eventually." "Eventually," Olivia repeated, her heart beating faster at the implication. Gideon stopped walking, turning to face her. The setting sun bathed his features in golden light as he took both her hands in his. "Olivia Foster, 6 months ago you were ready to let a river take your life, and I was a man with no direction beyond the next horizon. Now here we stand, both with purpose, both with a place." He drew a deep breath. "I'm asking if you might consider sharing that place with me as my wife." Although she had sensed the conversation heading in this direction, the actual proposal still took her breath away. Olivia looked up at the man who had quite literally saved her life, then saved it again by showing her a path forward. "Yes," she answered simply. "I would like that very much, Gideon Zane." His face transformed with a smile of pure joy as he lifted her into his arms, spinning her once before setting her down to kiss her thoroughly. "I love you," he said when they finally parted. "Have since that day by the river, though I didn't recognize it then." "And I love you," Olivia replied, the words feeling both new and somehow familiar on her lips, "for giving me a reason to step back from the edge." They were married in April, when the Wyoming landscape was beginning to green with new life. The ceremony took place in Sweetwater's small church, attended by the entire R household and various townspeople who had come to know them over the winter. Olivia wore a dress Martha had helped her make, ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Gideon, uncommonly handsome in a new suit, watched her walk down the aisle with an expression of wonder that brought tears to her eyes. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love and fidelity exchanged before God and community. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Gideon's kiss held both tenderness and promise, sealing their covenant with unmistakable devotion. The celebration afterward at the R was joyous and prolonged, with food, music, and dancing continuing well into the night. As evening fell, the newlyweds slipped away to the small cabin Gideon had been building with help from the other ranch hands. It was still unfinished in places, but the main room was complete, with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and a bed covered with Martha's wedding gift of a handmade quilt. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zane," Gideon said softly, lifting Olivia over the threshold. She looked around the simple space, feeling a surge of emotion at what it represented, not just a dwelling, but a future built from the ashes of despair. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning into his embrace. Their first night as husband and wife was a gentle discovery of each other, a culmination of months of growing love expressed in physical devotion. Afterward, lying in Gideon's arms as moonlight filtered through the cabin's single window, Olivia marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "About rivers," she replied honestly. "How they can take life or give it, how they change course unexpectedly." He drew her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Some changes are for the better." "Yes," Olivia agreed, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Some definitely are." Spring flowed into summer, and the small cabin gradually became a home. Gideon continued his work with the horses, earning recognition throughout the territory for his training methods. Olivia divided her time between assisting Martha in the main house and establishing their household. Together, they planted a garden, added a porch to the cabin, and began planning for the future. That future arrived sooner than expected. By late summer, Olivia knew she was with child. When she shared the news with Gideon, his response was everything she could have hoped, joy mingled with protective concern, excitement tempered with awe at the new life they had created. "A family," he said wonderingly, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our family." The prospect of parenthood brought both anticipation and occasional anxiety. Gideon, having lost his first wife in childbirth, sometimes woke from nightmares that left him shaken. Olivia, whose own mother had died young, harbored fears about leaving a child motherless. Yet these shadows couldn't dim the brightness of their shared joy. They prepared for the baby's arrival with practical measures, converting a corner of their bedroom into a nursery space, accepting Martha's offer to teach Olivia about infant care, setting aside savings for the future. As her body changed with the growing child, Olivia often reflected on how dramatically her life had transformed in a single year. From the desperate woman at the river's edge to an expectant mother with a loving husband and secure home, the contrast was stark enough to seem almost unbelievable at times. One evening in late autumn, almost exactly a year after their first meeting, Gideon suggested they ride to a particular spot overlooking the Snake River. Olivia, now visibly pregnant but still comfortable on horseback, agreed readily. They rode at an easy pace through golden aspen groves, the Wyoming landscape painted in the rich hues of fall. When they reached the overlook, Gideon helped Olivia from her horse and led her to a flat rock where they could sit comfortably. Below them, the river flowed, its waters catching the late afternoon sunlight. "Thought we should mark the anniversary," Gideon explained, his arm around her shoulders. "Not of the day we met exactly, but of the day everything changed." Olivia leaned against him, one hand resting on her rounded belly. "It's beautiful from up here, peaceful. Different perspective makes all the difference," Gideon observed. "That day you could only see the river as an end, now we can see it as part of a larger landscape." The metaphor wasn't lost on Olivia. "Like life," she agreed. "When you're drowning in despair, it's impossible to see beyond the moment. You need someone to pull you out, help you breathe again." Gideon's hand covered hers where it rested on their unborn child. "You did the hard part yourself. Choosing to live, to build something new. We both did," Olivia corrected gently. "You chose to stay, to put down roots after years of drifting." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the distant mountains. The baby moved beneath their joined hands, a reminder of the future taking shape within her. "Thank you," Olivia said finally, turning to look into her husband's eyes, "for being there that day, for saying those words." Gideon smiled, the love in his expression warming her more effectively than the autumn sun. "You're not going under again," he repeated softly, "the promise as true now as it had been that fateful day." "Not while I have breath in my body." "No," Olivia agreed, returning his smile. "We're staying afloat together now." As the sun set over the Wyoming wilderness, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold, Gideon gathered his wife close. Behind them lay a past of separate sorrows, before them stretched a future of shared joys. And between, this perfect moment of acknowledgement that sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, and new beginnings can arise from the very edge of endings. Their daughter was born as winter settled over the Triple R, arriving after a difficult but ultimately successful labor that left both mother and child healthy. They named her Hope, the significance of the choice obvious to them both, though they explained it to others simply as a virtue we admire. Hope Zane grew into a spirited child with her father's green eyes and her mother's auburn hair, beloved by the entire ranch community. By the time she was toddling about, Gideon had established his own breeding operation as part of the Triple R, with special focus on horses well suited to Wyoming's challenging terrain. Olivia managed their household and kept accounts for both their family business and the main ranch, her organizational skills proving valuable to everyone. Their cabin expanded with the addition of another bedroom when Hope was 3, and again when her brother Matthew joined the family 2 years later. The garden flourished, a symbol of their rooted life, producing vegetables for their table and flowers that Olivia arranged in jars throughout their home. On Hope's 5th birthday, as family and friends gathered to celebrate, Mr. Richardson announced his intention to retire gradually, with plans to sell portions of the Triple R to trusted employees, Gideon among them. "Building something that lasts," the older man explained. "Ranch this size needs to be passed on properly, not just sold to some Eastern speculator when I'm gone." The opportunity to own a significant piece of the operation they had helped build was both exciting and daunting. That night after the children were asleep, Olivia and Gideon sat on their porch discussing the possibilities. "It's a risk," Gideon acknowledged. "Taking on debt, expanding our responsibilities." "Life is risk," Olivia replied, her hand finding his in the darkness. "But calculated ones, taken together with clear eyes, those are risks worth taking." Gideon squeezed her fingers, his voice reflective. "If someone had told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting on my own porch in Wyoming with a beautiful wife, two amazing children, and the chance to build a legacy. I'd have said they were touched in the head. Olivia laughed softly. And if someone had told me as I stood at that river's edge that the stranger on horseback would become my husband and father to my children, I'd have thought the same. Life takes unexpected turns, Gideon mused. Thank God for that. Indeed, as they looked back over the path that had brought them together from deepest despair to profound joy, they could only marvel at the strange, winding route and the crucial moment of intervention that had made everything possible. The river that had nearly claimed Olivia's life had instead become the first chapter in a story of redemption and renewal, a story they continued to write together with each passing day. Not without challenges or occasional sorrows, but with an abiding awareness of how precious their shared life had become. And when their children asked, as children inevitably do, how their parents had met, Gideon and Olivia exchanged glances over the little ones' heads, silently agreeing to save the full truth for when they were older. For now, Gideon would simply say, "I found your mother by a river and knew right away she was someone special." Which was, after all, the essential truth that in recognizing each other's value amid desperate circumstances, they had discovered something rare and beautiful, a love born of compassion and built on mutual respect, a foundation strong enough to support whatever future awaited them on the Wyoming frontier. As the years passed and their family prospered, the memory of that day by the Snake River never faded. Instead, it served as a constant reminder of how quickly life could change for worse, but also for infinitely better, and how a single act of intervention could ripple outward, creating waves of possibility where before there had been only despair. For Olivia and Gideon Zane, that intervention had become the cornerstone of their shared life, a moment to be remembered with gratitude rather than shame. And when Hope asked on her 16th birthday why she had been given her name, Olivia finally shared the story in full of a woman who had lost everything. A river that had seemed like the only answer, and a cowboy who had simply refused to let her go under again. "Your father saved my life twice that day," Olivia explained to her wide-eyed daughter. "Once when he pulled me from the water, and again when he showed me there was reason to keep living." "And your mother," Gideon added, his arm around his wife's shoulders, "saved mine by giving me something worth staying in one place for. Sometimes the rescuer needs rescuing too." Hope considered this revelation with the seriousness of youth on the cusp of adulthood. "So I'm named for what you found together?" "Yes," Olivia confirmed, her hand finding Gideon's, "because you were the embodiment of it, the future we couldn't see until we found each other." It was, perhaps, the greatest lesson they could pass to their children, that even in the darkest moments, possibility remains, that connection can arrive unexpectedly, that what seems like an ending may in fact be the beginning of something far more beautiful than imagination could conceive. And as they watched Hope and Matthew grow into adulthood, establishing their own paths while remaining connected to the land and legacy their parents had built, Olivia and Gideon knew with certainty that the river had not claimed what was most precious after all. Instead, it had become merely a backdrop to the real story, one of rescue and redemption, of two broken people finding wholeness together in the vast, unforgiving, yet ultimately generous Wyoming wilderness.